Okay, now, let's do this with comparative advantage. Let's suppose that instead of what we had before, now let's suppose that us is better at everything. Us is better at making guns, 100 to 50. Us is better at making roses. Okay? So us can take one person and put them to work making guns and make 100. Or can put those people to work making roses and make 100. Them, one person can make 50 guns or 80 roses. So we're better at making guns and we're better at making roses. That's comparative advantage here now. We're better at everything. Should we still specialize and trade? And the answer is yes. The gains are not going to be as big, but we're still going to benefit by specializing and trading. Okay, so again, let's assume that both countries have 1,000 people. Okay, if we look at guns, we're a lot better at making guns, right? We're twice as good at making guns, yes? And if we look at roses, we're 25% better. So where's our advantage? Well, our real advantage is in making guns, right? We're so much better at guns than them. Okay? We're a little bit better at making roses, but we're a lot better at making guns. So we have a comparative advantage in guns, and they have a comparative advantage in roses because it's the closest. When I play volleyball, I set. I'm the setter. Why? Because it's the thing I suck least at. I'm a horrible middle blocker. I'm an okay hitter, but not very good. I'm a decent setter. The thing I suck the least at is setting, and that's what I do. So that's my comparative advantage. Same here with them. They suck at guns and roses. But the thing they're least bad at is roses, and that's what they need to focus on. Okay? So the U.S. has comparative advantage in guns. 100 over 50 is better than 100 over 80. Them has a comparative advantage in roses because 80 over 100 is better than 50 over 100. Good? All right. So if we just make stuff, we take remember, we took half the population. So if we take 500 people and make guns, we get 50,000 guns. If we take 500 people and make roses, we get 50,000 roses. 500 people and them make guns, you get 25,000. 500 people and them make roses and get 40,000. Without trade, this world has 75,000 guns and 90,000 roses, right? Us has 50,000 and 50,000, them has 25 and 40. Together we made 75 and 90. Okay? Now what we need to do is prove by specializing we can be better off. The difference here, and because of this is a comparative advantage world, them is going to specialize completely. They should just make roses. But us, for this to be Pareto optimal, us is going to make a few roses. We're mostly going to make guns. This is Princess Bride, right? Wesley is mostly dead. Well, we're mostly going to specialize. We're mostly going to make guns, but we're still going to make a few roses. Okay? So let's say we make 85,000 guns and 15,000 roses, and them makes 80,000 roses and no guns. When we add up the total, there's 85,000 and 95,000. So before we were at 75 and 90, now we're at 85 and 95. We gained 10,000 guns and 5,000 roses by specializing and trading, even though us is better at everything than them. It's still to our benefit to specialize and trade. That's the key to understanding. Why do economists believe in free trade? Why do they almost all love free trade? Why do they think free trade is so important? Because if everybody specializes and trades, the whole world can be better off. Can be better off. Okay? And again, we're at A when we produce, but after we trade, we can be out at B. We can be in the unattainable area, which is no longer unattainable because we're working together with somebody, right? You're climbing a cliff. You might not be able to get to the top by yourself, but you got a friend, you can get there. Things that are unattainable are no longer unattainable if you work together. Okay, so free and fair trade allows us to consume more than we produce. This is the reason why we had something called NAFTA, which we're in the process of replacing with something called the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement. It's a free trade agreement. It's designed to allow free trade between the three North American countries, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. NAFTA has allowed free trade from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico since Bill Clinton was president. You'll note that these trade agreements are passed heavily by both Democrats and Republicans, supported by Democrat and Republican presidents. The picture up in the right-hand corner there is the people who signed the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We were supposed to be part of that, but we got out of it, and not really sure why. I mean, there was a lack of enforcement powers, and I get that, but the USMCA, most of the words in the USMCA, they just copied from the TPP. So it's not that the TPP was something that the current administration didn't like, because they copied huge sections of it, word for word, into the USMCA. Okay, there was other technical things about it that they didn't like, but they still signed or trying to get Congress to approve this new free trade agreement, which is essentially the TPP. It's just not called that anymore. And it doesn't have all the other countries in there. So you see that China and Japan and Canada signed this new free trade agreement, and they're free trading, and we're not free trading with them. All right. Topic number whatever we're up to is the topic of economic growth. Economic growth occurs when the PPF moves out. It moves further away from the origin. This point down here, which I should have labeled but I didn't, is 0, right? That's the origin. As we get farther away from the origin, we're producing more stuff. We get more Guns N' Roses at B than we had at A. When the curve moves out, that's economic growth. And economic growth is really more the topic of macro. It's really the topic of 103, not the topic here of this class. But as economic growth occurs, we can get more of everything, and we get new combinations of things that didn't exist before. How do we grow? What makes us grow? Well, one, most important over time, actually, is capital. An increase in our capital stock, more factories, more machines. That helps us grow. Right? The easiest way to grow is to build factories, put in machines. It's possible also to grow because you have natural resources. We have more, and I'm throwing workers in there too. All right? We have a lot more workers today than we had 100 years ago. Because we have a lot more workers today than we had 100 years ago, we can produce more because we have more workers. And then the third thing we have is improving technology. As we improve technology over time, we can grow. We sent people to the moon in the 60s with computers that are a lot less powerful than your phone. We improve technology, we can improve production, improve our outcomes. Okay? Economic growth always changes what we can produce. I don't know if you've ever used a phone like the one in the bottom left-hand corner, but you certainly don't carry one of those around in your pocket. You probably would not like watching a television set like that one. And if you ever had to do your homework on a computer like the Apple II, you wouldn't have been all that happy about it. Actually, you would have been thrilled at the time, and now you look back on that and you go, I had one of those? Seriously? So the fact that we have economic growth changes what we can produce. It also means that our economy changes. Sears used to be the largest retailer in the entire world, and Sears is not going to exist fairly soon. Amazon, which didn't exist until 25 years ago, is now the largest retailer in the world. There's lots of computer companies. When you say, oh, computer companies, but there's lots of computer companies that don't exist. The largest computer company in the world for many years, like 100 years, was IBM. They're not even close to the largest computer company anymore. The second largest computer company in the world throughout the 70s and 80s was a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. They don't exist anymore. So some companies go away as we grow and change and get these new technologies and the economy grows. And some new companies begin and come in and become successful. For this to all work, there has to be what we call economic coordination. In the U.S., economic coordination happens through markets. So we have a list here in a second, but it's a market-driven system. In the old Soviet Union, under its communist regime, the government tried to tell everybody what to do. The government decided what your job would be. The government decided what factories would produce. The government decided where you would live. All of these decisions were made by the government. The economy was coordinated centrally by a small number of people in the government. We think, economists mostly think, that distributing this out is better. It's better to have 25 million businesses making decisions than 20 people in a government agency. You'll get better decisions if you spread those decisions around, and everybody only has to make a little tiny piece of their decision. They don't have to make decisions that affect the whole country. So in our world, coordination happens because we have business firms, because we have markets, and it's all lubricated by the fact that we have money. So we don't actually have to trade thing for thing. It also works around the fact that we have property rights. So the guy who's selling bread owns the loaf of bread till he sells it to you. And then when he sells it to you, you own that loaf of bread. So there's this ownership, these property rights. And then I can defend property rights because if somebody runs up and grabs that guy's loaf of bread, he can have the police run them down and get the loaf of bread back. Property rights. All of these things work their coordination magic through the fact that we have prices and market setting prices, and we make decisions based on those prices. Okay? There is a circular flow, and this is kind of the way it looks in your book. I'm not a fan of this particular way, but a lot of people draw it this way. You have households and you have businesses at the top and the bottom here. The red ring is stuff. So households send people to the factor markets. Factors are the factors of production, right? Land, labor, capital. Households send people to the factor markets. Factor markets send land and labor and capital to businesses. Businesses use that land, labor, and capital to create goods that get sent to the goods markets, which then are bought by the households. The money flows the other way. The households, which is the blue ring, the households pay for the goods they buy. The goods markets, the firms who produce the goods, get that stuff. They then pay their land and labor and capital, right? They pay their workers and they pay the people that they owe money to. And then those people go home and become a household and spend their money. And the money keeps flowing around and around and around in the blue ring. And stuff keeps flowing around and around the economy in the red ring. All right. We need to go talk about markets. We have a couple chapters now just about markets.